Now, a test case in the world of body modification, which came to conclusion this week. On Thursday, Brendan McCarthy from Wolverhampton, who practised under the name Dr. Evil, was jailed on 3 counts of grievous bodily harm. He had removed one client's ear, split the tongue of another, and removed the nipple from a third. What made the case so interesting is that all 3 of Brendan McCarthy's customers named in the court case had asked for the work to be done. None had complained to the police. But the judge, Amjad Nawaz, this week, who handed down the sentence, said that Brendan McCarthy had caused serious and irreversible damage to all 3 for commercial gain. Now, Dr. Samantha Pegg, who's a senior lecturer in criminal law at Nottingham Trent University, has also been following the case, and she's been telling me why it is so significant.
So Brendan McCarthy had been doing a number of body modifications. So he was charged here with having split a customer's tongue, removed a nipple, and the removal of an ear. He'd been operating as a tattooist and a piercer, but he wasn't licensed to perform those procedures. And he was charged with 3 counts of Section 18, which is GBH with intent, for those procedures that he'd performed.
If you were listening to the details of this case and you were not particularly somebody who was likely to have body modification performed on you, you would think, well, quite right too. We can't have people who are unlicensed, who may be operating in unhygienic conditions, who certainly aren't qualified and don't have the backup on site. We can't have people like that carrying out what are, in effect, cosmetic surgery procedures.
Indeed. I think, though, that there isn't enough recognition that there's a significant subculture of body modifications. I appreciate fully that at least a couple of these procedures that were performed here were more extreme, and they certainly were surgical. But for example, tongue splitting is a reasonably common form of body modification. People perhaps aren't aware of that because they don't move in those circles, but it doesn't mean that we should restrict individuals' rights and their autonomy to have these procedures performed. What was your response to the sentence? 40 months of which he will serve 20? I was extremely surprised. Extremely surprised. I mean, they were serious charges. The sort of bottom end of the sentencing for GBH with intent is about 3 years. You can, though, move outside of that sentencing guideline if there are exceptional circumstances. It's very surprising that he's been given this sentence when he isn't a danger to anybody. You say that Brendan poses no risk to society, but in carrying out these procedures, he was potentially risking the lives of his clients. That's what the Court of Appeal said. Certainly, but I mean that's the case for piercing and tattooing aren't 100% safe. You can always have allergic reactions. There can be concerns about health and safety when those procedures are performed. But we allow people to carry out those procedures because we recognise that individuals should have the autonomy to consent. This is a little bit different, though, isn't it? When you're removing a client's ear or taking their nipple off. Oh yes. Yeah, I do think that a line has got to be drawn somewhere. I mean, I'm not a medical professional. It's not for me to draw the line. The judge said that there was a public interest in giving him a custodial sentence and said that he thought it would be a deterrent to other people who carry out body modification procedures. What's your reaction to that? I think it's very unlikely to be a deterrent. I think reading, comments that have been made online, I think the body modification community think the courts have got this wrong. They haven't. They followed the law as it stands, but I don't think it's going to operate as a deterrent. It might deter people from doing the more extreme procedures, so certainly removal of body parts, but for lesser forms of body modification, such as tongue splitting and maybe ear pointing, certainly branding and scarification, the law still remains rather unclear as to whether they are unlawful to perform. And there's been no further clarification on whether you're operating outside the law when you do those lesser procedures. That this case certainly suggests that they may well be unlawful to perform. So I think we've been left in a state of confusion, really, as to what is lawful, and that people are going to continue to do these procedures and perhaps move them outside of piercing and tattooing studios where they're advertised,
and do them in conditions that are significantly less safe than they have been doing to date.
There you go. That's Samantha Pegg then. She's a lecturer in criminal law at Nottingham Trent University. Now, Brendan McCarthy was licensed for his piercing business by Wolverhampton City Council. It was they who tipped off the police after receiving a complaint from an unnamed member of the public. Councillor Steve Evans is the Cabinet Member for City and Environment on Wolverhampton City Council.
I think it's wrong that service could be offered. It's a surgical procedure. You need the proper surroundings and buildings. You need the proper equipment. Something could have gone terribly wrong. What happens if something went wrong and there was non-stop bleeding? It was in excess. They couldn't stop the tongue from bleeding. What happens if there was something afterwards where it didn't heal properly or it got infected? These are surgical procedures, and it's surgeons that should be allowed to carry those procedures out. So I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't have the tongue split if that's what they want to pay to have done. I think it's about who does it and the premises that they do it at. And I don't think a backstreet body modification parlour is the right premises. And I don't think the gentleman would be qualified or have the right equipment to carry out those types of procedures.
That's Councillor Steve Evans from Wolverhampton City Council. Let's get a word now with Brendan McCarthy's eldest daughter, Alex. Alex, good morning to you.
Hiya, Adrian.
I'll talk to you in a moment about some of the comments made there by Steve Evans. Firstly, though, I want to talk to you about you and your family. Your dad this week has been sent to jail, given a 40-month sentence, of which he's been told he will serve 20 months. I know that many people in the family were shocked by the severity of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're all pretty devastated, to be honest. Obviously, you know, we were kind of prepared for the worst. It's still not easy. You know, it seems like a kind of unfair test case in some respects, but it's kind of a grey area. I mean, that's what lots of people have touched upon. And for many people, you know, they're still allowed to continue to practice body mods in the UK without any criminal convictions. So, you know, for us, it's just kind of... It's just, you know, it's something that we've just got to kind of think about. I mean, it's ripped the family apart in some respects. You know, it could have happened to any family, really. There's a lot of body modification artists out in the UK, and it's just, you know, it's just unlucky that it's happened to my dad, really.
But what the point that Steve Evans made, though, you know, your dad's not a qualified cosmetic surgeon. He didn't have the backup if anything had gone wrong in his studio in Wolverhampton. Do you understand why the case was brought and why, in law, he had to be found guilty?
I understand it to a degree, but I do know that my dad's been practising for my entire lifetime. I'm 24. He's gone to many councils across Devon, the Midlands, and he's asked for legislation to be put in place, to which he's been pushed aside. So obviously in that respect, you know, when someone's asking for the legislation to be put forward and told we don't want to do that, how then is it something that's wrong in that respect?
I mean, you could hear Samantha Pegg there. She's an academic, so she's independent, clearly sympathetic to a lot of your argument, but saying that when it comes to removing an ear, though, there is a line that has been crossed. Do you accept that?
I'm not sure, because, you know, there's a lot of these procedures that have been performed by my dad that are not available in the NHS. They're not available, and surgeons don't perform these procedures, and that's something that, you know, we need to touch upon, I think.
Indeed, and I think that was acknowledged by the prosecution in the case, that people had come to your dad for procedures because in some cases cosmetic surgeons had refused to carry them out. You touched on this grey area as well, because as you say, there are loads of body modification artists out there. It's certainly a subculture, but it's quite a large subculture. The judge said he was giving your dad 40 months partly as a deterrent because it's in the public interest. Do you think then this is going to stop the practice of body modification? No. Body modification's been going on for thousands of years, before Parliament's laws have even existed. You know, it's been in tribes, you know, many moons ago, and I think all it's going to do is push it underground. This is something that people have wanted legislated, not just by my dad, but by people that get work, who also perform the work. And I think that if it had just been regulated, this could have
been a completely different outcome, not just for my father, but for artists across the UK and in other countries.
And I know that Wolverhampton City Council as well, in the press statement immediately after the sentencing, made exactly this point. They said this case now should act as a catalyst for national legislation.
Well, yeah, it should, because as I said before, there's lots of other artists across the UK that are performing, have been performing and continuing to do this since, the case has been brought to the media and, started all these years ago. So I think legislation should have been put in place, because it's not fair that one man could be convicted and, others are still performing the same things.
Alex, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed. That's Alex, the eldest daughter of Brendan McCarthy, jailed this week for 20 months, given a 40-month sentence, of which he'll serve half for body modification.